Welcome back to Improvision Entertainment. My name is Hunterman, and this is more of Euro Truck Simulator 2. And I am going to map out... Hold on, wait. I'm going to play the end of MacBreak Weekly, and then we're going to switch to the news.
Andy, Leo, and Jason at Dynamic Island.
Yeah, exactly.
So...
You guys are going to have to work on that in Photoshop.
Okay.
I decided that I was going to hit these gray locations.
It feels very much like synthesizers, and when we said, oh, well, those aren't really, and people create incredible music with them, but they're doing a lot of the stuff for you, and this is kind of...
Well, actually, hold on.
So it's a lot of fun. Yeah, I'll send them to you. I'll send you a couple of them.
Yeah, we've been talking a little bit about
Okay,
it.
we're going to hit those gray...
I really do.
Golf Edge?
It is the first time AI has actually seemed like it actually is somewhat alive to me. It's pretty amazing. Andy, by the way, Alex, 090.media, hire this guy. Just hire him. That's all. That's all I can say. Hire him. Alex,
Okay,
Andy,
gonna hit
Jason,
here.
thank you
This
so
is going to
much.
be a long
Great
trip.
to have you. We do MacBreak Weekly.
They want me to go back this
Our first show
way,
of the week, Tuesday
but
morning at 11
this is a
a.m.
long
Central,
gray
2
road. I'm
p.m.
probably not
Eastern,
going to have... What the
1800
hell?
UTC. You can watch us do it live at live.twit.tv. If you're doing that, you might want to chat with us live at irc.twit.tv. That's open to all. Of course, our Club Twit members are chatting in the Discord, where they are having a great time as always. If you want to become a member of Club Twit, support the shows, get ad-free versions of all
Hit
the
those
shows,
question marks.
get access to the Discord, which is a community.
Hit that question mark.
transcends
Yeah,
Twit.
this is going to be a little bit of a
Plus the
trip
Twit
here at
Plus
the end.
feed with all sorts
We're
of
going to take the
interesting
scenic
shows we
route,
don't
is
even
what we're
put out,
doing.
for the public, like Hands on Mac with Micah Sargent, Hands on Windows with Paul Thurrott, the Untitled Linux Show with Jonathan Bennett, Stacey Higginbotham's Book Club, The Giz Fizz with...
The truck is actually repaired, however.
This is, I think, a great deal for $7 a month. Go to twit.tv/club twit.
We're going to get our time in.
Club twit. That's it for MacBreak Weekly. I hope we'll see you here next week. But meanwhile, it's time to get back to work because break time is over. Darn it.
Hey, we should talk
There you go,
Linux.
break time is
It's
over.
the operating system that runs the internet, but your game consoles, cell phones...
Sounds like there's an ad at the
maybe even
end.
a
Let's
machine
not have
on your
that.
desk. But you already knew all that. What you may not know is...
Okay. Close this. Oh, that little box has been hanging out next to me this whole time, hasn't it? My bad. Let's see here. Let's see if we have the TYT from basically today. September the 14th. That was yesterday. Perfect. That's what I meant. Alright, so trigger warning for the news. This is for Wednesday, September 14th. 2022. Okay, all the settings should be set from before. Make sure I can see the Twitch chat, and we're good. Alright. In it for literally the long haul.
Welcome to TYT. I'm your host, Anna Kasparian, and we have a gigantic, awesome show ahead for you, including an interview today with Jason Miles, who is the co-host of the This Is Revolution podcast. I wanted to have him come on because of his personal experiences dealing with various methods to help with the drug addiction epidemic
Whoa,
that we're seeing in the
$10,000 from Simon
country.
L.
He has
Euros. Why am I saying dollars today? I don't normally make that mistake.
And I think that perspective is incredibly invaluable. So we'll have him on the show in the first hour to discuss his personal experiences and his thoughts on what we can do as members of the left to help
Damn it, red light.
get the country out of the situation it's currently grappling with. The
And
opioid
rain.
epidemic, of course, continues. Now we have around 100,000 people dying of drug overdoses per year. So it's an important topic, and I really want to explore it more we will be doing that in the first hour. Later in the show, we're also going to have John Iadarola join us for a fun second half, and we'll discuss some lighter stories for sure, fun stories. I'm sure John will have some thoughts on what's going on in the world of fantasy content, including
Fantasy
House of the
content?
Dragons, because that show, I was a little worried it was gonna suck, but I watched it and I'm already 3 episodes in. Love it. Couldn't recommend it more. So we'll talk about that and more in the second half of the show. But before we get started, I wanted to encourage you guys to like and share the stream. I think it's an easy way to help support the show and support the message. And you should also become a member, because in the members only bonus episode today, my husband, who was a former professional baseball player, will be joining us to talk about the fact that the minor league has
Christian
now
is going to be
joined
on
MLB
the
union, which is long overdue. This is
show?
really, really good news. And so he's
I
going to
don't know
come
if
on
you
to
guys
talk
have
about his
been
personal
on before.
experiences in the minor leagues and what it was like, because I don't think a lot of people understand. Even in the minor leagues, you don't get paid much, and the conditions aren't so great, and so unionizing will help.
I just realized I have a heavy vehicle and it's raining, so this is a bad idea to be going this
Speaking of
fast.
labor, by the way, we're going to begin with a story to update you on the rail strike. So let's get right to it.
We're not asking for the world here. We're asking for a few days off a month to spend with our family instead of living on a train. We spend 240 to 260 hours a month sitting on these trains or sitting at the hotel rooms away from our families.
I love how shocked and surprised conservative hosts are when they hear from workers who are about to strike because they don't have great working conditions, but more importantly, they don't get paid time off. And in this case, they were specifically speaking to a rail worker, and there's good reason for having this discussion. We got to keep in mind that rail workers are planning on striking as soon as Friday of this week, and I'll tell you why in just a moment. But just to break down that video even further, the whole point of that conversation was to bring up the fact that the
looks like I added 400 kilometers to this trip
are not willing to accept
by going that extra route. I wonder if it's one of those you shouldn't travel this with a cargo thing roads.
There are 12
you know what?
major railroad companies that are
We're here for
about to lose workers
achievement
to
progress
a strike later this week because they're
over the long
unwilling,
term.
to change the fact that they aren't giving these
Tonight on stream,
workers
we
enough
completed
time off
the
to
Italia
deal with
DLC
illnesses,
achievements.
family emergencies. I'm going to give you the details.
We're playing
of all of
vanilla
that in
Euro
just a
Truck
moment,
Simulator
but I do
2.
think it's important to watch the rest of that Newsmax video. So let's take a look.
So
David, we did reach out to the Association of American Railroads, and they say that.
So what we're doing right now is
get
making our way
sick
to
days
Iberia,
and paid
the
time
Iberian
off.
Peninsula,
Whoever told you we get
DLC,
sick
to
days
start
is
our work there
manipulating
in the
data.
next
We
stream.
get paid time off that we earned the previous year before. Before the new policy came about, we were allowed to take 5 days off and 2 weekend days off a month. Now we could take virtually 1 day unpaid off a month, and then the only other time we could take off is our paid time that we had to earn the previous year.
Yeah, that does seem ridiculous. They would never let airline pilots do that. Is that
Exactly.
issue number one for members of the unions?
100% is number one.
So here's an update on what's currently happening with the railroad workers, their employers, and where the current negotiations are at. As we've shared on the show before, railroad workers have been threatening to strike, and the White House actually intervened to prevent that strike from happening. And the reason why the Biden administration would want to intervene is because, of course, railroad workers striking would be a massive disruption to the economy. And that kind of disruption, especially so close to the midterms, would be a disaster for the Democrats since they're in charge right now. Now, as I mentioned, the railroad workers are potentially going to strike later this week unless Congress gets involved and basically prevents them from doing it. But before I give you the details,
I still understand what
let me give you
Congress
the
could do to
details on
stop
the
them.
terms of the negotiation that
Just
the
allow them
railroad
all to be
workers have
fired?
rejected. So the negotiations did lead to a proposed pay increase, which is pretty significant, right? Now, that's not enough, though, because these are individuals who are working incredibly long hours. Oftentimes, they don't see their own family members for weeks and weeks and weeks. And so they want to be able to spend more
Apparently I
time with
nicked
their
the
families,
curve,
which is
but it's
understandable.
okay.
They want time off in case they are sick. And unfortunately, right now, they only get 1 day in some of these railroad companies, right? The workers get maybe 1 day off per week for, let's say, an emergency or an illness. And clearly that's not enough, right? And so if the strike happens, as I mentioned, it could have major ramifications for the economy. The Biden administration has been pretty aggressive in trying to do something about inflation. And as recent reports indicate, inflation is still very much a problem. I think that there are multiple factors that are leading to inflation in different sectors of the economy. We've talked about that before. But I do want to mention that if a negotiation has not been reached by Friday, they will strike. After that, those unions can legally strike, a move that could drive transportation costs higher, stall commutes and gum up shipments of coal, chemicals, cars, and grain, and cost $2 billion a day by one estimate. Okay, so again, those are the
50?
ramifications for the economy,
Why is it
which
50 through
this
here?
is where workers' power really lies, when they're able to bring companies to their knees by doing a strike like this. Now, how much will
Goldfish
this have a
discovered.
toll on the economy? Well, depending
Oh, there's
on
my speeding violation,
how you want to
but it's
measure
okay.
it, the railroads
I was
at
kind of
some
expecting
point
it. Hold
touch
on.
between about a third to about 45% of all freight in the U.S. at some point or another.
Oh, I hit it
Just
really
let's
far
pause for
away,
a
but it's
second.
okay. We'll get on
That's
the
a quote
roundabout
from
and we'll turn
Jason
around.
Miller, who's
It'll be fine. It'll be fine. It'll be
professor over
fine.
at Michigan State University. If you know that the nation's economy literally relies on these workers, there are as many as 100,000 rail workers involved here, right? Just give them more time off. They're not, as far as I understand it, by the way, they're not even asking for more paid time off per month to deal with family emergencies or sicknesses. They just want more unpaid time off, meaning workers have been retaliated against if they need to take more time off, unpaid, which is crazy. Now, the White House has already gotten involved, as I mentioned earlier. The White House is reportedly speaking with ocean shipping, truck, and air freight providers to explore ways to keep goods flowing, but filling a railroad network-sized gap in the economy could be a tough task, and this is where the $2 billion number comes in. It could cost as much as $2 billion
almost hit
a
that
day
truck.
just to do that, and that's according to the Association of American Railroads. It's an industry group, and while I do think that it will be costly for the economy, you should also be a little dubious of that $2 billion a day number, because this is essentially the industry trying to encourage Congress to step in and essentially prevent the strikers from being able to strike. And there is precedent for that. Now, the association estimated that it would take 467,000 long-haul trucks daily.
I think
to
we're going to
haul
stop caring about
what the
speeding
railroads
violations,
do.
except for when it concerns
There
flipping the
simply aren't
vehicle.
enough trucks
I think
or
we're just
truck
going to start
drivers
taking the hit to
handle that
speed.
volume, it said
Yeah,
in
that's
the
obviously a
report. And
speed
that I do
camera.
believe.
That's
As
there's
we
no
know,
cop
there
there.
was already an issue with a shortage of truck drivers, and so the idea that truckers can fill that gap left behind by striking railroad workers is insane. And I would probably venture to say that some of the truckers probably wouldn't want to, go against the striking workers, and so
What was
and
that, less
fill
than
the
that one
so-called
employee
gaps.
just made me?
Now,
Yeah, whatever.
again, that responsibility to fill the gaps would fall on the truckers. Now, why haven't the railroad companies been able to reach this deal? Again, the main issue was leave, and they've already agreed on the percentage increase in pay. So in July, President Joe Biden intervened to avert a strike, naming a panel of arbitrators to mediate the contract disputes. The panel last month issued a 124-page report recommending a 24% pay increase, sounds pretty good, and bonuses through 2024, along with back pay through much of 2020. Now, that satisfied the railroads and has tentatively been good enough for 10 out of the 12 labor unions. But the two labor unions that have decided, no, we're going to reject this, are specifically calling on more time off, okay? So the remaining holdouts, the Brother of Locomotive Engineers and Trainmen and the International Association of Steel, Metal,
Income
Air,
4,000,
Rail, and
almost
Transportation Workers
5,000
account for well above
euros.
half the rail labor force. They say they want any agreement to address what they say are strict attendance, sick, and time off policies. That's all it takes at this point. So
Apparently I didn't hit that car hard
basically,
enough.
Three
So
out
no
of
fine.
the 12 unions representing these workers have already voted in favor of doing this strike by the end of the week.
There was a wreck.
Again,
I'm circumventing
the
it.
only thing that the employers need to do is agree to provide more time off for these workers so they can deal with life, something that we all have to deal with, right? So I think it's totally reasonable. And so I should note that the two remaining holdouts when it comes to the negotiations so far were the Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineers and Trainmen and the International Association of Sheet Metal, Air, Rail, and Transportation Workers. They account for well above half of the rail labor force. They say they want any agreement to address what they say are strict attendance, sick, and time off policies. And again, incredibly reasonable. And instead of just providing this one final demand to the workers, who, by the way, without those workers, economy goes to crap. Without those workers, no revenue, okay, for the employers here. All they need to do is the bare minimum. They've already agreed to the pay increase of 24%. They've already agreed to back pay. Just give them the time off that they need. And instead of doing that so far, by the way, we're hearing that they're hoping that Congress will intervene and essentially prevent these workers from striking. They're trying to
Really sucks when you're depending on the government to step in and oppress your workers for you.
Are telling investors now's
Like,
a
that's
great
so
time to
fucked
invest
up.
in railroad companies because there's no way Congress won't intervene. And it gives you a sense of what Congress is really meant for in neoliberal politics. In neoliberalism, the government isn't there to protect you, the worker. The government is there to protect corporate interests. And that's what we see play out over and over again. And while the Biden administration really wants to position itself as, you know, a pro-labor administration, and to be sure, to be fair, Biden and his NLRB have certainly been better than administrations in recent decades, which isn't saying much. It's a low bar. I would have liked to see the Biden administration actually apply the pressure to the railroad companies to ensure that these workers get the time off that they need. Okay, that's what's important to do here. And as I mentioned earlier, there is precedent for Congress stepping in. So the June 1992 railroad strike lasted for 2 days before Congress passed a bill banning strikes and lockouts. That was signed by George H.W. Bush at the time. And then you have lawmakers who have used the Railway Labor Act of 1926 to intervene at least 11 times since 1963. So again, it's not unprecedented for Congress to get involved, but I would really like to see Democrats put their money where their mouth is. They love to campaign on supporting the workers and doing right by them. How about you actually put those words into action, and instead of intervening to prevent the strike from happening, you apply pressure to the employers to agree to this one final thing, which I know this is like the billionth time I've said it, is incredibly reasonable. All right, we got to take a break. When we come back, we're going to have an excellent interview. I'm really looking forward to it. Jason Miles, co-host of the This Is Revolution podcast, will be joining us to talk about the opioid epidemic and what we can do in terms of harm production, how we
Maintenance
can
cost of $1,000. That sucks.
battling this devastating problem that we're seeing all across the country. Don't miss it. We'll be right back. Welcome back to TYT. I'm your host, Anna Kasparian, and we have a fantastic guest and an important conversation up next. Joining us now is the host of the This Is Revolution podcast, Jason Miles. Jason, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. This is cool.
So Jason, I've been meaning to talk to you about your experience with safe injection sites, with harm reduction policies, because clearly the way this country has dealt with the opioid epidemic, with people who are addicted to drugs, the fact that we've decided to criminalize them for so long has been so destructive. And we're starting to see a different approach in some parts of the country, California
Kind
being
of
one
zoning out
them,
and starting to realize how
where
many like
the
repeat
focus
trees
has
there
kind of
are, which is
shifted
kind of weird
toward
for
the
me.
idea of harm reduction instead of criminalization and prosecution. And you had called into the Majority Report back in February, and you just kind of wanted to share your perspective. I thought what you had to say was really interesting, and I wanted to kind of make space for you to elaborate on your thoughts a little more today. So first, let me just kind of set this up, give the audience some context. What have your experiences been in this space, in this area, dealing with drug addiction?
I myself have never touched drugs or drank, but drug addiction is pretty deep in my family as far as growing up with an addict. And I've faced homelessness. I actually was homeless for a while, and then kind of the only thing that saved me from it was recently moving down here to Mexico, where I live now. It was the only place I could afford. And I lived and worked with the unhoused for quite some time in what would be known as a wet facility, or a facility where people actually can use drugs. You're not going to lose your housing for drug use. And I had to work hand in hand with the position that I had, actually with a company, an organization called HEPAC. I shouldn't say a company, it's an organization that actually hands out needles. And I think when people think about safe injection sites, or when they think about even wet facilities like the one I was in,
A lot of new employees losing me money.
It always becomes it's either a I don't want it next to me kind of issue, or and that turns into I don't want it at all, sadly, or we need to have more of these things, but silently I don't want it next to me. Because one of the things is, and I can give Oakland as a perfect example, East Oakland. If you're familiar with the Oakland Raiders, who are now in Las Vegas, and the Golden State Warriors, who are now in San Francisco, they vacated a very large facility
check
that
what we're
now
doing.
only the Oakland A's have. And you probably have seen, I know you guys do a sports show, the attendance is extremely low. Sometimes there's
Okay, we're going to see if I can hit Bordeaux by just going off the
game.
exit.
And a lot of that has to do with the deterioration that happened around that area, especially when those teams left, and the little bits of business that were there left as well. So there were hotels there because it's actually right next to the airport. It's kind of a perfect location for a sports team. You have freeway access, literally exits right into the parking lot. You have public transportation access.
Hold on.
You have a subway system in the Bay.
Guess we got to hit this roundabout.
BART, Bay Area Rapid Transit, that lets you off right at the stadium. But we had a Walmart leave, and I don't know too many people that know what it's like when a Walmart actually vacates an area. It actually leaves a really large hole, and there's been a fight around who's going to use that building between the county and the city. And you create this environment where you have a lot of people that are also losing housing that got ramped up during COVID. So these hotels that were left there,
red light violation.
And what I think is kind of a great strategy, first step strategy in handling our homeless problem is single room occupancy, especially with these or SROs, you might hear people say that. And so we had a lot of emergency.
Bordeaux discovered. Bon Voyage, 25 of 31.
But some hotels didn't buy.
Wait, that sounds lower.
And
oh wait, no, it's not.
What then happened around those areas, because you had such a large...
I could do a 3-point turn, but there's a roundabout up ahead, so I'll do that instead.
Is kind of, and this wasn't part of the plan, of course, you build almost a hell zone in this area because it's an anything goes space. There's drug use, there's prostitution, there's tons of violence, and it's all going to happen in this space.
Okay, let me pause you for 1 second.
Sure.
Because you're touching on something, obviously it's uncomfortable to talk about, right? Because on one hand, you want to house people, you want to get them off the streets. Like, to me, that's the #1 priority, because if they're on the streets, it's dangerous. I mean, if you look at the homicides in Los Angeles, for instance, the individuals who are overwhelmingly overrepresented in the homicide statistics are the unhoused. So you want to get them in housing, but there is an issue with some of these public housing solutions, even if it's temporary housing, if they have the very strict rules on drug use, for instance, well, then you're going to deny people a roof over their heads, and it seems incredibly cruel. But I feel like there's also some downsides of not having any rules, and you're kind of touching on that right now, and it's really hard to hear it. But the thing that people forget about, because I used to be 100% against any rules, it's like just get people housed. But a woman actually reached out to me who used to be unhoused because she left her abusive husband with her kids. And she didn't want to be in an environment where she and her kids had to deal with some of the things that you're describing right now. So it's a complicated and nuanced issue, but I wanted you to continue. Yeah.
Sure. I have a few anecdotes, and I hope we have time for them. I'll try to be brief.
Sure.
And if we can come back, I can talk more about the idea of accidentally creating a hell zone, because I think none of us want that, right?
Right.
And one of the things that I tried to do in my position in the facility was reimagine the way we have these facilities, and it's very hard. So first of all, what I wanted to do was make it kind of an oasis. So I called all of the people that I knew from the industries that I've been in and friends that I've met over the years. And I also had to get as many people on board working there as well, because you're trying to reimagine how we imagine housing. And what it ends up becoming is warehousing.
I don't need to hit that question mark.
And I think a lot of people don't want to.
I need to go on those back roads, but I'm going to do it.
Once you throw someone in,
hopefully it's not terrible.
Grateful. So that also flattens the way we.
I think the last time I tried it, I had an articulated trailer and it didn't work out, and I got fined.
And my big issue with that is, if you really want to combat this, you have to accept the fact that not everybody's going to be the perfect homeless person. There's going to be real criminals in here. There's going to be pederasts in here. There's going to be rapists and murderers in there. Actually, by managers of the facility, were literally murderers that had turned their lives around. So you have to understand that the population that you're dealing with isn't all kind of idealistic.
Almost hit.
Right. And it's going to get ugly, some of the things that you're going to see. And I want to give a quick anecdote. There was a woman that came in with her boyfriend. And at some point, the boyfriend became abusive. Now, we don't know about anyone's spousal abuse problems. There is no knocks on doors and asking, how's the relationship going? And a lot of services weren't provided. People came to me all the time and asked for drug treatment service. Like, hey, can we have an AA meeting? And there's certain rules about having AA meetings. And another thing people have to understand is most of these things are run by nonprofits. So the state doesn't want to pay benefits to anybody. So they'll throw some money out to a nonprofit.
That's going to be a viewpoint, isn't it?
Try to keep everything as lean as possible. So all the programs that we instituted, even down to a school program that was because we had a woman in the facility that was a retired teacher, and all these kids that were in there, and wonderful people donated materials. We were able to have school for kids even during the pandemic. But again, this all comes from trying to reimagine this. And this isn't coming top down. It's not like Gavin Newsom is giving us orders, or the mayor is giving us orders, or city council.
Oh, I think I can get to it from over there. We'll see.
Is people wanting to create.
Why aren't they moving? I have a red light.
This situation. I'll try to be brief and tell me to shut up if I'm running out of time.
Darkest Dungeon. Darkest Dungeon should be on the poll.
Boyfriend. And
Darkest Dungeon should be on the poll.
And we get a call. Hey,
that's totally dark enough, and I purchased that in early access years ago, and I've been looking for an excuse to play it, and totally forgot.
Guy from fighting.
Crap.
It happens, right? There's one washing machine between 400 people. There's going to be some fights, right? So run over, talk to the guy, talk to the woman. She's upset, obviously. I have to take the man out of the facility. I said, hey, man, you got to go. He says, are you going to call the cops? I said, are you going to leave? He goes, yes. He leaves, right? So I go to
it's a recruitment agency.
And we talk. She's very upset.
I guess I should have realized that after a moment.
To a different room for the night. She said, yes, please. And I walk her to another room for the gentleman. He's already out of the facility. And I heard her break down and cry in a way I've never heard anyone break down and cry. And to just thinking about it right now is actually making me a little bit emotional. And so she wanted to go back to her room. She's like, thank you for this night. I was like, you can stay there. No, go back to my room. And unbeknownst to us, because hotels are not really set up for surveillance like you would think. It's more for surveillance of a parking lot. It's not for rooms. Right? It's where privacy comes into play. He was.
Don't be red. Don't be red. Don't be red. Don't be red.
And he kept sneaking back in. And we had to open doors for people.
Red light violation.
Right? They didn't have their own key.
Oh, did those not count? Those don't count.
I saw him in there.
Excellent.
And I took her aside privately, and I was like, hey, is he back? And she lied to me. She goes, no, not at all. Why would you think that? I was like, because I opened the door for you and I saw him. But she had asked me to open the door. That was her way of trying to warn me without warning me, right? So he didn't. Eventually, he had attacked her again, and eventually we had to call the police.
Okay. All right. So let me ask you. I have so many questions for you.
Okay.
So I think
it is kind of a long story, but it's good.
The
I'm
lack
learning things.
of government involvement is a really important one, because I see the same problem when it comes to building housing, right? Where I would much rather have the government be in charge of building the housing, meaning the government hires government workers, pays them really well, gives them benefits, and instead of hiring a third party, instead of hiring a private contractor to build housing so they can pad their pockets by inflating the cost.
At least we're seeing a bunch of places we haven't seen before, though.
I just think it would be much better to have the government facilitate all of that. What I'm noticing, just based on the anecdote you're sharing and your personal experiences, is that you have a community coming together trying to do their best.
Okay, let's check the map.
You have a nonprofit organization trying to do its best.
Yeah, that's the only.
But we're talking about people who have all sorts of, problems, issues, whatever you want to call it.
I was about to drive right past that question mark.
It goes beyond just putting a roof over their head, right?
That's probably a truck dealership.
It could be a domestic violence issue. Was there anyone within, your team working there who had some expertise on these issues, or was it just ordinary people coming together doing their best?
I'll be honest. No one wants that job. So you're dealing with people that some people stay. There's maybe, from when I was there, I left because of a COVID outbreak, and it was the second one. And I had a bit of a blow up, and as you can imagine, trying to reimagine the way that nonprofits usually do things, they don't like that, right? So I was a bit of a thorn in the side, and then I left. And there's only about maybe 3 people that are still there from when I was there. And then that actual facility actually went back to being a private hotel. And some people moved throughout the company to continue to help people get housing. And because that's our main goal, right? The main goal of this organization actually was to put people into permanent,
DAF truck
housing. But the problem was that we were just kind of in a warehousing facility where we couldn't speak to the issues that we were dealing with, especially when it came to violence, because the county didn't want to hear about it, and the nonprofit couldn't have the county hearing about it because that would be detrimental to the program. And the reason why I bring this up,
come on, I'm here,
on air, is because not to shut these things down. We have to understand that these are the problems that are going to happen if we want to reimagine what criminal justice looks like. I look at a person like.
Oh, you're being specific to parking place. Okay, I get what you're doing.
Bhutan in San Francisco, trying to reimagine.
Wow, that's a lot of money.
The justice system, reimagine the district attorney's office, and not incarcerate quality of life crimes that leads people down this path. I'll try to be as brief. Again, I know we have a short time. One of my coworkers, we had got a new guy. That was one of these dudes that had committed a major felony, but he was totally reformed and was working in the nonprofit sector. And this was like he had 2 jobs in the nonprofit sector. And part of our job was to hand out food to people at lunch and dinner time, right? So we're doing our food handout.
Lewis of the Explosives.
A unit where there was 2 women that had 3 children between the 2 of them in it. And one day, and their mom was there as well. One of their moms was there in the facility. So it was kind of a generational hangout in one of the rooms of the hangout dinner. And the guy I'm working with looks and sees what will be the grandma It's like, hey, girl. And just talks to her real casually. And he goes, looks at me and goes, I gotta talk to you. And we go into our lobby, the communal lobby where everybody can come talk to us. And he goes, the daughter, I knew when she was 3. And when I was doing dope and committing robberies, I was doing it with her mom and her father. And she was in the car with us. That girl had no chance. She had 2 children that were in the facility. She had more children out in the world. One was a 12-year-old that had stopped going to school at 2nd grade. And one was 6. Teaching both how to read at around the same time with the schooling. And when you understand that, that's not everybody is in this on the same what's the word I'm looking for?
Yeah, I mean,
Trajectory?
there's definitely
Same
no
start.
one. Right, exactly. I mean, it's not an even playing field for everyone from the beginning, right? People
But it
have, yeah.
It's infuriating. It was infuriating for me because before I knew that, I would have to deal with her and deal with and I didn't mind dealing with the kids to a certain extent. I'm a dad of 4, but it would make me mad at the way she dealt with things. But finding out the story, the backstory, it's a reminder. And what I always say is, if homelessness doesn't frustrate you, you're not close enough to it. But
Yeah.
you should always be walking a frustrating line of, man, I hate this, but it's. You have to have a certain level of understanding because a lot of times we otherize people. Once you're homeless, once you're mentally ill, then you're other.
Yeah,
Right.
no, I think you're right about that. So, final question for you. From your experiences, obviously you noticed that there were some flaws, right? So if you had all the resources and you could create a supportive system that's actually way better, it's reimagined, it's kind, humane, it does more than just put a roof over people's heads. I mean, housing's important, but clearly the homelessness issue it's so much more nuanced than that because people come from so many different stories, so many different issues, whether it be an abusive relationship or drug addiction. So what would you want to see in an ideal program or system to give folks the help they need to get their lives back on track?
First and foremost, I want it to be somewhere where people felt comfortable in the sense of they weren't on the cusp of constantly losing something for not following a certain rule or having the right paperwork. Number 2, I'd want not just counselors in the facility, but the counselors also have outreach help as well because we don't want to burn people out constantly. I would want there to be some sort of communal staff in the sense of people can learn how to cook, not just for themselves, but for everybody. So we do things.
Oh, that's what that
communally.
pillar is. It's a speed limit pillar.
Education.
That's
also
okay. I
communal.
no longer
One of the
care.
greatest things that we did was when we got to have the school, it wasn't we brought outside teachers. It was the people that taught that had lost their home for whatever reason got to teach again.
Like we're
And
past
there
me
was
caring about
something
speeding
about that
violations unless it's
vibe
the first one in a
that
run.
Whenever that people would see, because I always did these things in the space where people could see. When we hit the personal training, the physical.
It's a beautiful
therapy,
area, though.
People had injuries for 20 years. And they couldn't move arms and legs, and they were finally able to get range of motion again. And even the yoga was kind of one of those things. Where like I never thought I'd be doing yoga. So can we create a place that's kind of like a resort and change the way we view this instead of looking at it as warehousing a problem of ne'er-do-wells? If you want drug counseling, here it is for you. But definitely we have needles for you. If you need, and sharps. You know the biggest problem we had? We lost so many janitors for. There was no place for people to throw away needles. And we had a lot of people had HIV and hepatitis. And the maintenance staff was getting needles stuck into their shoes.
Yeah.
This country is in such a massive crisis. And, I don't think, first of all, thank you for coming on and sharing your experiences. Because,
Yeah,
I
really,
think
dude.
it's really easy for people to otherize and to just want to throw people away or warehouse them. But it doesn't solve the problem, right? It's more than just putting a roof over people's heads. And I think that you raise a lot of interesting issues. In fact, hopefully we can continue the conversation at a later date. In fact, on October 23rd, you and I are going to be doing a live show with Ben Burgess. in Los Angeles. So get your tickets if you're interested. If you're in LA or near LA, you should come see the live show. Again, it's on October 23rd, which is on a Sunday. And I could talk about this with you for the entirety of the show, but unfortunately we're out of time. And everyone check out the This Is Revolution podcast. It's hosted by Jason Miles.
I don't want to risk
fantastic.
the gas.
Jason, thank you for being generous with your time and coming on today.
Thank you for having me.
All right, we're gonna take a brief break, and when we come back, we'll talk about how Democratic members.
I'm sure whoever rich person was with this yacht won't mind us going on this magical yachting adventure.
Stocks.
I'm sure it's fine.
That story. Don't miss it. We'll be right. I wish we could have continued with that conversation. We have so much more to get to in the rundown, but check out Jason Miles and the This Is Revolution podcast. I think he has really interesting perspectives, especially as someone who was once homeless himself and has experienced this. I wanted to talk a little more about the opioid epidemic.
Can I get through on a long curve?
I promise you we'll definitely go back to that topic at a later time. Wanted to read some member comments, starting with Biden Flavor Corn Pop, who says, finally we get to see this hot husband Anna keeps referencing. Yes. Ojam writes
okay, so it hasn't happened
conservatives
before.
seem to have a really hard time empathizing with other people's circumstances.
Wrong way violation.
They kind of just assume people demanding better conditions are just complainers who aren't working.
I mean, that was only 200 euros. Who cares?
To the rail workers, I mean, they're away from their families for weeks at a time. I couldn't do that. You know, I don't have kids, but I wouldn't want to be away from my husband and my dog and my parents for weeks at a time. That's crazy. Theater Goddess, aka Verbose Dragon, writes in and says, when I was younger,
Verbose Dragon, I like it.
For work and had on-call weekends, it was tough because he was away a lot and could get pulled away sometimes. But when he was off work, he was able to be there for and with us. When I babysat for kids whose fathers worked for the railroads, he was never able to fully relax because he was always on call. It was really bad for the kids. Theater Goddess, I mean, it's almost as if you're a rail worker yourself. Like, this is literally what they're saying. They're like, listen, we get sick sometimes. We need to be able to call in sick without retaliation, you know? So I hope they get what they want because they deserve it. They deserve a basic necessity, which is time off. Strategic Diversity Dragon says, as a European, I am shocked at Newsmax. Never thought it possible that workers would not even get paid sick leave. We have unlimited paid sick leave. Strategic Diversity Dragon, I'm curious where in Europe you're living. So right back.
I am also curious.
Now then Zen says, when I have tech failures, I beat my computer also. To be fair to me, I punched the desk out of frustration. But anyway, you know what they say, spare the rod, spoil the computer. All right, we've got 30 seconds left. We've got
more RAM, spoil the computer.
Anna is an amazing host. I love Wednesdays when she's the first hour is solo. Thank you for that support. And Neglectic writes in and says, it's more likely than Anna or John would beat Jank at fantasy football than Democrats actually standing behind rail workers. Not that I would do any better at fantasy football. Fantasy football is so incredibly dorky. Like, it's the dorkiest sounding thing ever. Let's get back to the show.
Nerds!
I love hearing from our members. Trista wrote in from our member section to say that she loves live interviews on the show. So I promise that we'll do more of it, especially these topical issues that have such a huge impact on communities. So thank you for that comment. Thank you for being a member. We love and support you guys, and we couldn't do what we do without you. All right, well, let's get to our next story.
Nancy Pelosi has had months and months and months to bring this thing to the floor. September 30th, that's when you all go on recess. You got a little over 2 weeks. Is there any chance Speaker Pelosi brings this thing to a vote? You can't blame Republicans on this one.
I can't believe I'm saying this, but Stephanie Ruhle is speaking truth. And that was a conversation specifically about legislation.
I don't know who Stephanie Ruhle is.
Meant to ban members of Congress from trading individual stocks. And this is an issue that is near and dear to my heart because while we certainly do talk a lot about how money in politics corrupts our politicians and makes them even more disconnected from the constituents they were elected to serve, The issue.
Okay, I don't
with
think there's a
them
lot of
also
being off the road
profiting off of the
situations
very
ahead of
companies
us,
that they should
so
be regulating is a huge issue.
let's double check our
that
map.
need to
Do we have
address.
any
And
out
there's
of the
been a
way
lot
things
of
we need to hit?
backlash toward,
Oh yeah, we got to get
reports
lack.
that members of Congress have been trading individual
Get
stocks.
these question marks
that
going
they
on.
have been legislatively,
let's
so
go
there are
this
conflicts of
way.
interest there. And I also think that
And then
there
come
is
back and
some
hit,
insider trading
I
going on,
think.
so there's been backlash in regard to that as well. Now, Stephanie Ruhle was speaking to a Democratic representative, a congresswoman by the name of
Yes.
Abigail Spanberger.
That's a little out of the way. All
And
right, so
I
we
think
do have
it's
some
important
out of the
to
way
hear
stuff
what she has
left.
to say in response to
But hopefully it'll be
the
fast.
question and statement from Ruhle. Hey, you guys are in charge. You guys going to do something about this? You can't blame Republicans. Here's what Abigail Spanberger had to say.
If the speaker wanted to bring it for a vote this week or this month, she certainly could. And so we've seen kind of stall tactics along the way. There was going to be a committee hearing. There was going to be additional legislation introduced. We haven't seen that. The House Administration Committee was going to take action. We haven't seen that. It's very straightforward. There are many industries, many places, many journalists who in fact can't buy or sell individual stocks because of the potential conflict of interest depending upon the subject matter that they cover.
Yeah, and let me be clear. It's not a potential conflict of interest. It is a conflict of interest. As a legislator, it is your job to ensure that corporations aren't.
I need to remember to
abusive
shift
their
down into fifth when I
workers.
do that.
You're supposed to keep your constituents, the American people, safe from exploitative behaviors from corporations. Like, that's part of the job. And it's really difficult to do that when the reason why these employers, the reason why these companies and corporations are as abusive as they are to their employers is because they're always looking to cut costs associated with labor to do what? Maximize profits. And they maximize the profits for their shareholders. They literally have a fiduciary responsibility to do just that. And so if you have members of Congress invested in individual stocks, they're going to want to protect that profit motive. They're going to want to protect an employer's ability to maximize profits. It is a massive conflict of interest. And let me be clear about something else. Look, I would like to see the House pass legislation that would ban members of Congress, their spouses, and their staffers from trading individual stocks. Now, do I think it's going to happen? No, I don't think it's going to happen. Maybe the House will pass something. There's a Senate version of the bill in the works as we speak. But does anyone really think that there's any possibility that this kind of legislation would pass in the Senate considering the filibuster? So unless we do something about that legislative filibuster that requires 60 senators to vote in favor of something in order for it to pass, we're never going to get legislation like this through Congress, period. That is the reality of the situation. So when you see Democratic politicians boast about how they're introducing this legislation, it's really important to understand that it's really nothing more than a little PR stunt. Because you got to focus on the first order of business. And the first order of business is, okay, what are the obstacles in the way when it comes to attempting to pass this legislation? So I want to go to Nancy Pelosi now, because if you can recall, Nancy Pelosi, in the very beginning of this whole debate, was very dismissive of the idea that members of Congress should be banned from trading individual stocks. In fact, she was asked about it during a press conference, and here's how she handled it.
I know.
completed a 5-month investigation finding that 49 members of Congress and 182 senior congressional staffers have violated the Stock Act, the insider trading law. I'm wondering if you have any reaction to that, and secondly, should members of Congress and their spouses be banned from trading individual stocks while serving in Congress?
No, I don't know to the second one. We have a responsibility to report in the stock. On the stock, but I'm not familiar with that 5-month review, but if people aren't reporting, they should be. Because this is a free market and we're a free market economy, they should be able to participate in that.
Yeah, we're a free market economy, so we should be able to participate in massive conflicts of interest by personally investing in individual stocks. That would, of course, corrupt us and lead us to pursue our own personal financial,
Why did that car come to
priorities
such a
over
slow
the
crawl?
best interests of the people who elected us into office. So, like, that was an abysmal, terrible response. But then she changed, right? All of a sudden, her rhetoric softened when it came to this issue, and she said that she was far more open to the idea of passing such legislation in the House, although that legislation hasn't been introduced, it hasn't been debated, it hasn't been voted on. What gives? Well, Pelosi was asked about that today, and here's what she had to say about it.
Just because somebody introduces a bill doesn't mean it becomes the law of the land. There's been a discussion about it, and just recently, this morning, actually, the committee, we've been going back and forth, and they were refining things and talking.
No, she's
to
really
members
uncomfortable talking about
what
this.
they think will work, and we believe we have a product that we can bring to the floor this month.
Okay, so a lot of excuses there, but her rhetoric has softened on the issue. And I would, this is my opinion, I would venture to say that the reason why her rhetoric has softened is because A, she got a lot of backlash after she said, it's the free market, we should be able to participate. And B, she knows that this is not ever going to pass unless something happens with the legislative filibuster in the Senate. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the Senate is working on its own version of this legislation, which is unlikely to pass because there's no way 60 senators would vote in favor of it. But to further prove my point that Nancy Pelosi isn't really serious about wanting to pass this kind of legislation, she called on Representative Lofgren, of course, another Democrat, to essentially reconcile the Senate version of the bill and the House version of the bill. And if you look at the stock activity of Lofgren and her husband, conflicts of interest. Not the person that I would put in charge in making sure that, we reconcile both
Roll the
versions
truck's
of the
connection
bill
lost,
and get
unable to
something
save your
passed.
progress.
And it's because I
Uh-oh.
don't think they're serious about getting anything passed.
I didn't lose the internet, did
I
I?
do want to get into an investigation.
YouTube, are you the only one here?
Good investigation, actually.
But I'm
done
going to
by
get
the New York
booted out of this
Times on
job
this
if I
issue.
can't World of
And
Trucks
I love
finish.
this kind of data because it just shows you how corrupt Congress has become. And again, it goes
Stream is
beyond
still running.
money in politics. It goes beyond campaign donors.
But seriously,
They
it's
also have
gonna, like,
focus on their own personal financial
Put me on the
interests,
side of the
right?
road or something
So
in a
let's
second.
take a
I
look at
remember
the
this
first
happening
graphic
one
here,
time in the
because they
past, the
looked
distant
at
past.
stock trades between 2019 and 2021, and they found that from 2019 to 2021, 183 current
Just making sure my cargo's still back
senators
there.
or representatives reported a trade of a stock or another financial asset by themselves or an immediate family member, meaning their spouse or their dependent children, right? Or not dependent children, just their children who live with them. It doesn't even have to be someone they cite as a dependent. But if you break it down further, the New York Times found that more than half of those members of Congress
Gonna be
sat
going
on
over there,
congressional
turning around, coming
committees that
back.
potentially gave them insight into the companies whose shares they reported buying or selling. And again, this is analysis by the New York Times. So that's 97, okay? Almost 100 current senators or representatives who have reported trades of individual stocks, either by themselves or members of their immediate family, that intersected with the work that they do in the committees that they serve. So going back to Abigail Spanberger and like, oh, it might give the appearance of a conflict of interest. No, it is a conflict of interest. It's a massive conflict of interest. And I want to provide specific examples of that, okay? So over the 3-year period that the New York Times looked at, more than 3,700 trades reported by lawmakers from both parties posed potential conflicts between their public responsibilities and private finances. So let's go ahead and look
This
at
is really
the
out in the
trades.
middle of nowhere,
Let's look
though.
at trades, okay? And by the way, this is
Nice,
a
but look at all these
bipartisan
spite
issue,
polls.
Okay, this is not a let's attack Democrats, let's attack
Echoes
Republicans.
discovered.
It's a let's
Oh, I can
attack
turn
all
around.
of them because
No,
they're
wait,
all
no,
doing
I got a
it
question
kind
mark,
of
don't I?
situation, okay? So Representative Alan Lowenthal's
Yeah, I gotta hit
wife
this question mark.
disclosed that she had sold Boeing shares on March 5th of 2020, which was, conveniently one day before
What do we think,
a
guys?
House
Probably a
committee on
viewpoint
which
out in the middle of
he
nowhere.
sits released damaging findings on the company's handling of its 737 MAX jet, which was, of course, involved in 2 fatal crashes. Yeah. I don't know.
Whoops.
Timing seems a little shady here. Could there be, number one, of course, conflict of interest, but also insider trading, which if we were accused of insider trading, we would be prosecuted. Okay, and it wouldn't be by a Senate ethics committee or a House ethics committee. It would be
Discovered a viewpoint.
You know, the Federal Trade Commission. They would be investigating to see if there was any insider trading happening. Even if you're a celebrity
Trash
like
on the
Martha
road.
Stewart, you engage in insider trading, you will be prosecuted, and you will spend time in prison. In this case, you have the leaders of this country, the people making decisions about critical legislation, potentially engaging in insider trading and just kind of getting away with it because they get cleared by ethics committees. Not interested. It's like the same thing that you see with police departments or specific cops who have been accused of excessive force, getting investigated through an internal group of people, an internal investigation. I'm not interested in an internal investigation. I'm interested in a real investigation to see if there's criminality here, if there's insider trading going on. Let me continue. Dr. Deborah Malumid, the wife
I think this
of
is
Lowenthal,
probably the best call.
the Democratic lawmaker Alan Lowenthal, bought or sold Sunrun, which installs solar energy systems in homes on 97
Industrial
occasions
area
during
of
a
Lac.
years-long period. During that time, Sunrun shares
With a yacht.
experienced two rallies, one that
It's
began
beautiful.
late in 2019 and extended into early 2020. Keep this timing in mind, it's important. And a second, much bigger one after a market-wide rout
I wonder what
caused
that guy's
by
doing.
the outbreak of the coronavirus pandemic in March. Okay. Now, in 2020, Lowenthal got real busy. Okay, promoting what? Renewable energy. So in 2020, Lowenthal, a member of the House Committee on Natural Resources and the chairman of an energy-related subcommittee, was part of a bipartisan group that pushed for the inclusion of renewable energy companies in pandemic
don't be a
relief
train.
measures. Many of the protocols eventually passed last month as part of the Inflation Reduction Act. And guess what? That, of course, is going to mean, especially if you're invested in renewable energy companies like Sunrun, you're going to profit off of it because the government has just passed policies that prioritize renewables, including solar energy, wind, and in this case, companies that Lowenthal's wife had invested in. Now, in June of 2020, he also co-sponsored a bill to provide tax incentives for using renewable energy, but that never received a vote. Now, Sunrun shares began rallying about that time. By October, they had reached what at the time was a company high of $80 per share. They cost only $9 per share when Lowenthal's wife bought those shares earlier that year. So you can understand how much of a profit they made. But again, it's not just Democrats.
Are you a
Republicans
cop or are you a
involved
white
in
car?
This, shady activity as well. Representative Mike Kelly's
you're just
wife,
a white car.
Victoria Kelly, bought $15,000 to $50,000 worth of stock in the mining company Cleveland Cliffs, just one day after Representative Kelly's office learned that the Commerce Department would initiate a tariff investigation that might benefit the company. Representative Kelly had lobbied Trump's administration officials
The
for
scenic route,
additional
everybody.
tariff protections, according to an ethics office report. Kelly's purchase was the only trade she made in an individual stock that year, records suggest. She took a nearly 300% profit when she sold 8 months later. No, I'm sure.
Well,
I'm
that's
sure it's
totally fucking corrupt.
innocent. I'm sure there was nothing wrong with that. Those stock trades. I'm sure it had nothing to do with insider information that obviously we're not privy to. I'm sure it had nothing to do with the fact that, you know, we're talking about an individual who gets to weigh in on policies
back
that
the way we
have
came.
impacts on the companies that he's invested
I wonder how much
in,
time I'm
he's
actually
invested
wasting
in.
doing this. I mean,
So
I'm
look,
having an
it's a
enjoyable,
necessity. It's
like going out
incredibly important
of my way to
pass
go
this
somewhere.
legislation,
But at the
but
same
we also
time,
need to be
I wonder how many
real
other like
about
missions will just take me to
whether it's
these
gonna pass,
out of the way
how it
places,
would pass,
and I wouldn't
and
have
any
to
Democrat who
do
purports
this.
to be in favor of passing this legislation, but fails to address the very real problem of that legislative filibuster in the Senate, is full of it. Again, it's nothing more than personal
Greg?
marketing for their campaign purposes and nothing more. I would like to see an actual
I remember seeing
fight
that on the way
to
in.
get that corruption out of Congress, and so far haven't seen much of that. All right, we got to take a break. When we come back, John Iadarola will be joining us to cover stories that I missed in the first hour because we ran out of time. So we'll be back with conservatives losing their minds over what Lindsey Graham did yesterday in proposing a federal abortion ban. We'll be right back.
All right. They will be right back. 1 second.
Welcome back, everyone. Anna Kasparian and John Iadarola with you. John, I feel like I understand you for the first time on how much you love to go into the studio to do the show. But, we're doing this out of necessity, not because we want to work from home. And man, I gotta say, our whole team is so invaluable because it's so nice to not have to worry about the tech.
Yeah.
Like, it's so nice to have professionals
Yeah.
focusing on the tech. But anyway, it's good to have you.
Yeah, it would be great to be back. We do the damage report in the morning, and I have a light, but most of the light comes in through a window, and it varies like to half and double, like from 1 minute to the next. So it's like dramatically changing how bright my image is. There's nothing I can do about it. I want to be back in studio.
Yeah. The last 2 days, I've had this affinity for kicking my camera in the middle of talking. I'm sure Aishwarya has noticed that. It's been frustrating. Anyway, well, we've got a lot more news to get to, so why don't we get started with Lindsey Graham?
Hi, Lindsey. Stop being in the news,
Why is
Lindsey.
Lindsey Graham, 25 days
Charlie
out from
Kirk.
ballots going out, galloping in and saying we need a federal abortion ban? Really, where have you been, Lindsey Graham?
It's rare for me to say that something happening in politics is my favorite, but this is my favorite. Conservatives panicking over voters knowing who conservatives are and what they represent. After literally decades, nearly 50
I know who
years
Lindsey
of
Graham
attempting
is.
to dismantle and
Senator from
succeeding
South
in dismantling
Carolina.
reproductive rights for women, Republican candidates, Republican lawmakers are now running away from the issue because it turns out that most Americans do not want to strip women of their bodily autonomy. They don't want the government to get involved in these incredibly personal and intimate decisions. And so rather than campaigning on this massive victory that took them 50 years to accomplish, they're running away from it and even going after Senator Lindsey Graham pretty aggressively. Because just yesterday, he proposed a federal abortion ban that would ban abortions after 15 weeks. Now, the likelihood of that passing is it's not going to pass. That just wouldn't pass. And so
Is that
what we're
John's
seeing
microphone?
is this like effort to hide the fact that Lindsey Graham
I think it was.
would promote this, push this, or that Republicans would even want this. Let's hear a little more from Charlie Kirk, and then we'll go to you, John.
That feels like election interference.
That feels like election
And I say
interference.
this as someone who is so pro-life. I would love a total abortion ban. 15 weeks is not enough, but I'm also not dumb. 25 days out from ballots going out, the Democrats are applauding, thank you, Lindsey Graham, for making this issue about abortion. They're enthusiastic that Lindsey Graham is now making this all about the one issue Democrats actually can win suburban women on. I wish that wasn't the case. I wish that the country was as pro-life as I am.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, but it turns out the country isn't
Where are we
as
going?
pro-life as you are. In fact, a Kaiser Family Foundation poll from last month showed that 61% of Americans do not want to do away with reproductive rights for women. They don't want the government involved. Other polls actually showed an even higher percentage, about two-thirds of Americans not wanting
I'm
the
going
government
this way.
involved. And I'm not
Yes.
surprised by that. I mean, of
Mhm.
course. But John, is this election interference? Is Lindsey Graham proposing a conservative policy that Republicans have been fighting for 50 years? Is
for
that
decades.
election meddling? Is that what's happening right now?
Well, look, the difference between me and, for instance, Charlie Kirk is that I'm physically capable of empathy. And so I understand how annoying it would be for him to do this. Not just that he would do it, but to do it knowing it can't pass. That's like the part of it that I love the most. Like that he's screwing them over and it can't succeed. So that's amazing. I absolutely love it. It is funny though that, like he says, I wish the country was as pro-life as me. I wish they wanted a full abortion ban, but they don't. Now notice, he's still going to try to make it happen. All of them are. The only reason they're mad at Graham is that he's doing this right now. Not that they're doing it. They want a full ban. They know that it's not popular. They know that people don't want it. And they will immediately jump in it if through one of the many ways that our political system is
I thought I was barely not going to hit that.
Structurally opposed to democracy,
I was just
they can get the power to do it.
minding my own existence.
Roe v. Wade.
Oh well, whoops.
All he's saying there is we need
These things
to
happen.
be loyal to each other in deceiving the American people about what
Wait,
we
did I
want,
just
what
hit
we intend to
myself?
do. We totally want this.
I think I did.
But we need to fool these people that we have no respect for whatsoever to make them think that we're
I think that was my same model truck.
just long enough.
What am I
for us to
driving
take
right now?
power,
No, I'm driving a
and then we can
DAF.
do the thing that we're lying to them about right now.
No,
It's very transparent.
It is incredible. You know, I applaud Charlie Kirk for the first time ever in how candid and transparent he is. This might be the first time he has told the truth. Because what he's saying here is, hey, dummy, Lindsey Graham, we're supposed to be lying to people, okay? The midterms are coming up. And I appreciate it. I really do. And he's not the only one. So Roger Stone also has some thoughts about Lindsey Graham's proposal, saying Lindsey Graham is purposely helping the Democrats to ensure that we do not take back the U.S. Senate. He's purposely doing it. Lindsey Graham, famous leftist, you know, engaging in this mass conspiracy to ensure that Republicans lose. Yeah, sure, okay. And Stone continues to say, this federal election is about our safety, security,
Why aren't we
health,
considering that
food
Lindsey Graham might
supply,
just be a
economy, free
dumbass?
speech, and the corruption of our justice system unless rhinos and Democrats try to make it about federal abortion policy, which the U.S. Supreme Court made unnecessary. Listen, I have no love for Roger Stone, and I don't see any redeeming qualities with this guy. But I will say, in the 1990s, he went on the record as supportive of reproductive rights. He also has a little bit of a salacious scandal in his past involving swinging and stuff. So I don't know if that had something to do with
tell
it.
how these roundabouts connect and where exactly we're going.
I don't know if that had something to do with his more liberal views with abortion. But I do want to go to one more video before I go to you, John, and that's Marjorie Greene. Marjorie Greene, of all people, trying to pretend like Republicans aren't trying to ban abortion. Let's watch.
They believe the way to drive people to the polls is by scaring them. They're lying to women all over America saying that they can't have an abortion anymore, which that's a lie. There's plenty of places that women can easily get an abortion.
No, I mean, they're just trying to scare you and say that we're banning abortion.
Right.
That's not true. You could still get an abortion totally. Yeah, I mean, if you're living in the middle of the country, if you're living in a red state, you have to spend literally thousands of dollars to travel out of state and pay for that abortion. But nonetheless, let's just pretend like Republicans didn't create that situation in the first place.
Yeah, 100%. Apologies. Apparently my mic is loud. We'll fix it in one of the breaks. But anyway, yeah, why are people freaking out? Why are they pretending that we're for this thing that we're totally for? We've been on the record for 50 years. This is literally the only thing that millions of our voters actually care about. We have chosen people for the Supreme Court exclusively to accomplish this goal. As soon as it happened, we cheered for 72 hours, then realized that people hate us and they think that we're crazy radicals. So now we need to pretend that we don't care. And what are you even complaining about? You can still get abortions in the places that we haven't successfully stripped it away from at the state level yet. We're trying in many states. They just did it in West Virginia. In state after state, they're pushing for it. Now, thankfully, in places like Kansas, the people overrode it. But like, she is lying in so many different directions simultaneously. She wants a federal ban, all of them, to every single one of them. They are lying about it being a states' rights issue. That's not at all true. And in the states, it's not like, oh, we got what we wanted and now the status quo is good. No, they want to strip it away at the state level if they can't do it at the federal level. So all of this is utter dishonesty. They understand fundamentally that the people don't support their positions. Obviously, they're anti-democratic. They don't care about that. And for many of them, there's an extra layer of dishonesty. So for Roger Stone, he said the fact that the Supreme Court made it stripped away the protections means that it's unnecessary, implying that he is happy with the status quo. what you said was that he gave some indication he was pro-choice earlier on. Charlie Kirk talking about how I'm totally pro-life, I want to ban everywhere. I think he's perfectly happy for it to be banned everywhere because he believes that women are at best second-class citizens. But the idea that these guys
Can I go through that?
They don't care.
Oh, is that like a height
Being
thing?
paid by millionaires and billionaires.
That's a height
to do
thing.
what
I don't
he
think I've ever
thinks
seen that
has as a
before.
show,
All
because
these other
he's
ones
really
just let me
driven
through.
by the spirit of evangelical Christianity.
Whoops,
And
I meant
he
to be in
can't
reverse.
take the injustice of he doesn't care about any of that. This is about money.
Vehicle
He's
crash violation? Alright.
cosplaying being a pro-lifer.
I don't really have to worry
as
about
so
another
many are.
vehicle to
There's
crash
someone
into,
like Marjorie
though.
Greene, she's a legitimate psychopath. She might actually believe some of these things. I don't doubt that some of them do. But for many of them, especially these men, it is a way to control people, especially women, in pursuit of economic goals that are always going to be far more important to them.
1000%. Now, I leave you with one
Can
more
I fit
video,
through this with this
and,
yacht?
It is someone I didn't expect to go on the record because he's been particularly horrendous when it comes to stripping women of their bodily autonomy, and that's Matt Walsh. Let's watch.
Do I know Matt Walsh? Oh yeah, Matt Walsh.
It's
right.
almost like he wants Republicans to lose.
He's the what's really a woman
that I
jackass.
actually, subscribe to here.
Super
He wants
transphobe.
Republicans to lose. This is this is sabotage. It's the only way to explain it. Given who it's coming from, especially. It's one thing if this is coming from someone in Congress who's just been deeply pro-life, a pro-life activist for years, and this has been their #1 issue, and so they, and this is all they talk. This is one of their central things they talk about all the time, and they're just so excited about it that they maybe put the cart before the horse a little bit and came out and proposed this right before the midterms. That would be one thing. Now, I'd still say it's a bad political strategy, but then at least I could believe that it's sincere.
Yeah, John, I mean, obviously Lindsey Graham, he's the problem, right? Lindsey Graham's the problem. Like, are we forgetting about the fact that this is, again, policy that people like when Roe v. Wade was reversed, Matt
Am I going
Walsh
uphill? I think I'm going
went on
uphill.
Twitter and was just, John, is everything okay in your room? Like, what's happening right? Can you mute yourself?
I don't really hear anything. I don't understand what's going on.
I don't know. It sounds like you're falling out of your chair, but you're not. So, anyway, all right.
There's literally no sound
I don't know.
in this
I don't
room.
know what that sound is. Okay, let's just.
I
turn around.
apologize.
I want to pull my hair out today because of the tech issues. It's driving
I
me
apologize.
nuts. Okay, so anyway, it's incredible because even Matt Walsh, who couldn't shut up about how happy he was, how giddy he was at women being stripped of their rights, is now turning around and scolding Lindsey Graham for doing what Lindsey Graham is supposed to do as a Republican lawmaker. But again, it's all about tricking voters. It's all about hiding the fact that they, on one hand, purport to be in favor of freedom, individual liberty. On the other hand, want to control the lives and bodies
I'll have to
of
pay
women in
attention to
this
the toll
country.
booths at the end
That
there.
is what the reality is. They support unpopular policies. They will push through unpopular policies.
7,000
even if
from
their own
Paul.
voters
Nice.
don't want them. They just want to make sure they do it in a way that is strategic for them.
12,000 from
And
Jonna.
doesn't hurt them when elections are coming up. That's what's really going on.
Yeah.
And it's just an incredible thing to see.
Yeah.
All right, let's take a quick break.
Okay.
We're going to be right back with more news, including Dark Brandon. I'm kind of into this Dark Brandon phase. I know it's because midterms are coming up, but it's a good look. He should continue it after the midterms. That and more coming up. Hey guys, got a lot of comments, so I'm going to read through as many as I can. Atomic Elbow in our Twitch section says, and by the way, thank you for resubbing for the 27th month. Happy to be able to share another month with my TYT family. Thank you for that. We've got Ray Dragon, who says, John and Anna are such a great combo, great comedic chemistry and banter. It's usually much better when we're hosting in person, but thank you for saying that. Century 22 says, I may convert
Century
to
22.
Christian Itty. Oh, meaning Christian, my husband Christian. I can see it. I'm like, wait, why are you telling me this? No, thank you for that. Anna, your hair looks great, Dragon says, I have a wild idea. If the government is so concerned about the workers striking, then how about they mandate that their needs are met rather than mandate workers can't strike? 100%. Actually, it's such a great point. Instead of even pressuring the employer in this case to provide that time off, we could have mandatory time off. as a federal policy. But
That would be
we don't
pretty
see that
epic.
happening. Jam Frazier resubbed with Prime for 2 months. Second month of Bezos
What is this
Bucks.
background
I've never
noise?
been a follower. Oh, I've been a follower and fan for years. When I found TYT, I found my family. Thank you so much for what you do. Much love to the host crew, various chat mods, and the TYT community. I love my TYT fam. All right, let's go to, how much time do we have? Let's go to Felicity91. I love this Real Talk segment with Anna. Thank you. Killa writes in and says, I'm actually surprised that Stephanie Ruhle here would call out Nancy Pelosi. Yeah, I mean, she was fine in that segment. She just was. I don't have any critique for how she handled that segment. Burning Bush Dragon says, I was so happy to hear that the New York Times was doing an investigation into the stock trades of members of Congress. Do you guys hear that? That's what I'm talking about. What is that? What does that sound?
I don't know. I have literally no idea. I've used this exact mic in this exact situation on many shows recently. I don't know.
Okay, we're gonna take a break and get back to the show. It might take a few minutes because we got to figure out what that noise is. We'll be right back. Hey everyone, back to the show. Anna Kasparian, John Iadarola. Let's get right to our next story.
Rick Scott of Florida proposed a plan. I wish I had enough copies to hand, but go online and look at it. Proposed a plan requiring Congress to vote on the future of Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid every 5 years. It's up for reauthorization. And I want to remind you, you paid for your Social Security. Every single paycheck from the time you were a kid, you paid for it. So every 5 years, Congress gets to vote, change, cut, reduce, or eliminate the entirety of Social Security.
Okay.
Imagine what it would be like to have a Democratic Party that sounds like that, not just when we're approaching midterms or general election, but when, you know, it's the middle
I think
of the
he
year,
realizes
there's no
he's got
campaigning
to kick his
happening,
game
and they
up or he's
actually
going to
mean what
get
they say.
trounced
That would
by
be
a
amazing,
progressive
right?
in the next
It would be
election.
incredible. And what we've been seeing
That
from
red card
Joe
didn't even
Biden
turn
in
signal.
the past few weeks has been pretty good. Pretty good. You know, he's not perfect. Obviously, I want more in terms of social spending.
Oh,
But
geez.
I'll say that the dark Brandon
I was calculating
label
time
is
based on
beginning
distance,
to-
but I didn't realize how long this
beginning to
recording
earn
actually
it,
went.
especially when he's calling people out by name.
It's crazy.
And in that speech, which was meant, by the way,
Oh,
to
well.
celebrate
Achievement
the
progress.
Inflation Reduction Act and its passage, he specifically mentioned Rick Scott, and he did that.
I guess
for
I
good
should have
reason.
realized when I started
Rick
the second
Scott
hour
is
of
the one who's
TYT.
trying to
Whoops.
promote
Now that I think about it.
policies that would increase taxes, not for the rich, not for corporations.
Sometimes
but
the first hour is
specifically
like
for
40
people
minutes
who
or
are
something
so
like that, and the next
poor
one is like
that they
56.
don't pay federal taxes. He wants to target them, okay? He also wants to cut Medicare and Social Security, two incredibly popular programs. And so when he heard that Biden had called him out, he decided to tweet this. Joe Biden said he wished he had enough copies of my Rescue America plan. So I stopped by the White House today to make sure he did. He also included a super goofy photo of himself holding his book. But Joe Biden responded to it. He quote tweeted it saying, "Couldn't agree more, Rick. And if anyone else wants to read your plan to put Social Security and Medicare on the chopping block, they should go to joebiden.com/Rick Scott's plan. Thanks for stopping by." So this is something, John, that I've been trying to get Democrats, trying through our show, of course, which isn't really as effective because they probably aren't paying attention. But nonetheless, having a message that specifically attacks Republicans and how they want to make people's lives materially worse is much smarter than just simply, I don't know, whatever else they've engaged in recent decades, right? I feel
Holy
like
crap,
they
dude.
also engage in whatever issue. It could be culture, it could be identity. Not to say that those issues are unimportant, but they tend to lean
What's
on
this,
those
unicorn?
issues in lieu of talking about what matters to all voters, which is their financial stability, their economic health, that kind of stuff.
Where do you
matters.
need it?
Healthcare.
In the
You know,
back.
here we're talking about Medicare as well. And so I like the messaging here, and I wish that he continued it.
Yeah. Yeah. By the way, I begin to speak extremely worried about what's going to happen. But yeah, the only way that it could have been stronger is if, with it being Rick Scott and the topic being Medicare, Rick Scott's history of massive fraud in that area, maybe he could have added that in, maybe make it a threat or something. But it is good. He's apparently decided at this point in his first term that the malarkey stops here, and that's good. I agree. There's multiple levels of good communication or good, using your position. This is better than what they normally do, or especially Democrats like Joe Biden normally do. Of course, it is not as good as actually delivering. Like, in theory, protecting those things is better than not. Although I would add the historic context of the Democrats not over the past couple of decades occasionally standing with Republicans to put limitations or consider limitations of those things would make it an even more effective
Which Joe
attack.
Biden
But
probably
good,
did.
They haven't done that in a little bit, so that's nice.
As a conservative.
And it isn't like he hasn't delivered in the recent history with the student debt cancellation, although I have some major concerns around that have just developed this week, as well as the climate change bill. But while I agree, I like the new Dark Brandon. I want to see more of it in terms of the rhetoric. As I've said, initially once they passed
For anyone
student loan debt,
watching later on YouTube,
it's only
I would
gonna
like to
last
thank
so
you for
long.
watching.
You need to keep actually
This
delivering.
has been
And-
Euro Truck Simulator 2,
and
presented
maybe
by
some people would
Improvision
say, well, we're so
Entertainment.
close to
I
an
have been
election, I just
Hunterman,
don't think that they're going to do it
and
yet.
I will
Well,
see
first of
you
all, that's a great time to do
in the
something.
future.
But there's a lot of problems that he could still
In a different
unilaterally
stream,
solve,
probably.
so I want to see that.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I agree with
Yeah,
you.
yeah,
I
yeah.
mean,
Later.
it's not just about